never seen a video be so, how do I say this? Be so perfect to be recommended to me. That was recommended to me in the Discord, the 18 plus Discord, which you can join in the description. Why Gen Z culture is basically medieval China. Chat. As someone who's in a very Chinese time in his life, I have to watch this. I gotta watch this.
The other day, I was thinking about it, and I realized, you know who these dang Gen Zers remind me of?
Who?
The Song Dynasty from medieval China. Anyone else been feeling this way lately? No? It's just me?
I guess.
Well, let me explain what I mean. There's all this new data to suggest that younger people these days want to spend their money on experiences, not physical items.
Okay.
I think it reflects this growing hunger for third spaces, and if you don't know what third spaces are, let me just quickly break it down for you. Basically, your two main spaces are home and work, and historically the third space was somewhere in the middle. Maybe it was the bar or the guild hall or the tea house. These
or a YouTube stream at youtube.com/BlueDemonRen where you can come hang out with.
Have all but gone extinct recently or have become prohibitively expensive, and young people are feeling it. They want the third spaces back. This maybe feels like a very 21st century vibes-based phenomenon, but it's actually extremely Chinese. The Song Dynasty was the first era.
Something about that just sounds so funny, bro. I've never heard something get referred to as that sounds so Chinese. This is something I've only started hearing recently. It is the funniest thing ever to me. I don't know why.
In history to have what we would consider as a lifestyle culture, where the cities were actually designed for pleasure and snacking and nighttime entertainment, just like so many downtown areas are today. There was this 12th century writer named Meng Yuanlao who wrote this fascinating memoir called The Record of a Dream of Splendor at the Eastern Capital. It's one of these shocking works from the Middle Ages that I love reading because it seems like it was written by someone recently instead of someone 1,000 years ago. He writes this whole nostalgic reminiscence of the Song capital city, Kaifeng, and talks all about the 24-hour tea houses and the professional performers and storytellers and the specific vibes of the different districts. There's this one section where he
it makes you, man, I really want to hit a like one of the districts in either like Japan, Korea, or in like China, dude. It really makes me want to go there because obviously, I mean, I can't go out. I mean, Chad, I run the streets, but I'm also not dumb, right? I'm not a dummy. I'm not going to go out into a random spot that I don't really know, unannounced in the middle of the night. You know what I'm saying? Like, so for some reason, I feel like if I going to like Shibuya at night, I would probably dig that, I feel like.
Talks about restaurant culture. I'll just quote the full thing here and you tell me if this sounds familiar. When the guests arrive, a single person holding chopsticks and a menu questions all of the seated guests. The men of the capital are extravagant and they demand 100 different things. Some hot, some cold, some warm, some regular, some extremely cold, and things like noodles laced with lean and fatty meat. Everyone orders
like that kind of lean or
something different. The waiter takes the orders and draws near a counter where he stands in line and recites the orders off from the start. I don't know, this to me literally sounds like a night out in 2026. I'm positive this isn't what you would picture in your head when you hear the word medieval. Also, just to give you a historical timeline.
That sounds like Hot Pot, chat. Who's trying to go to Hot Pot? Hopefully not a lot of people. I don't got that much money, but you know, we'll take the community. We'll all go out to Hot Pot, chat.
This is basically China on the eve of the eventual Mongol invasion, and it's a time and a place where consumerism is starting to flourish, and it's becoming a core identity for younger people. Bringing it back to Gen Z, I've noticed that there's this big obsession with what I would call curated living. I don't know, maybe I'm not describing it accurately, but it is super vibes-based, like life is one big Pinterest board. Think of terms like cozy games or the aesthetics of going on a
man, Stardew Valley. Listen, it might be midwinter, but I always choose an iced matcha. I mean, matcha's good, dude.
Walk around the city with an iced matcha.
Right.
It's this sort of return to the Song Dynasty scholar, gentleman, urban ideal. Your status isn't just about money, although that'll obviously always be important.
That'll always help, right?
Taste. Back then, it was about your taste in tea and incense and interior design. Now it's more so about your taste in underground music and niche TikTokers. The youth don't want to be told what's cool anymore by commercials and MTV with big corporations calling the shots.
it also helps or doesn't help, depends on how you look at it. It also helps that MTV, I think, went off the air, right? I prefer my Arizona tea or iced coffee. I've never been a coffee person, but I definitely like tea.
They want to create their own experiences.
I do like
medieval Chinese
Arizona
again.
tea.
Also, semi-relatedly, there's been a big surge in traditional Chinese.
I have seen. I don't know her name. Speaking of niche TikTok creators, I don't know her name. In fact, I might be able to find it on my phone before I finish my thought. But there is a creator on TikTok right now that is just, her whole content is just getting on here and saying, now that you are Chinese, everything she says starts with her telling people that they're now Chinese. It is like my favorite thing. How am I not finding this? But yeah, it is like the funniest thing ever. I actually haven't found it. Wow, okay. Yeah, but yeah, it's so funny,
medicine
bro.
trends among Westerners on TikTok recently. You see it everywhere. A number of Chinese American influencers have been sort of introducing these ancient concepts like qigong practice or drinking hot water instead of cold water.
Oh my God, yeah, it's the hot water thing, bro. Everyone's like, now that I'm Chinese, I'm drinking hot water. I tried it too, but it was because I was insanely cold, and I was like, you know what, I might have to, you know, just to warm up my body. But man, you know what's also hitting me with these things? It's Zelda Zone Zero right now, but it's typically most of the MiHoYo games. But right now, Zelda specifically, because we're in Feilum Heights, which is a Chinese-inspired area. And you know what I keep trying to want? It's osmanthus cakes, because Yesheng Wang just keeps talking about osmanthus cakes. Like, I want some, bro.
And the internet has been going crazy for it. So maybe medieval China is making a comeback in more ways than one.
Yeah.
We won't just focus on the Song Dynasty here. There's more to China in the Middle Ages than just that one period, but I do have a few more song boxes I want to check before we continue. Before we do that, just a quick plug. If you like my content, which of course you do, you should definitely join my Patreon, link in the description.
That's a like out of me.
You'll get access to the official Medieval Mindset
just this channel, just this video alone, that's a like out of me, brother.
Mindset book club, voting rights on topics.
I don't have to see the next of the video. I don't need to watch the rest of the video. That's a like out of me.
Special videos that don't get posted on my main channel. So sign up now, and if you're not subscribed to this channel, go ahead and do that as well. Back to the video. Maybe you've heard of the modern phenomenon of looksmaxxing, or maybe you aren't chronically online and have no idea what I'm talking about. Basically, looksmaxxing is the new version of the age-old concept of getting hot, although it goes way beyond diet and exercise and a little Botox. Her name is Sherry, by the way. I found her. Her name is Sherry. Are exploring all of these scientific avenues to try and improve their looks.
Okay, I get it, right? I get it. I think this just might be a little too much. Bro, why does this look like a wireless controller in your mouth? Are you going to start playing with, like, you know what I'm saying? Does this actually work? I don't know what this is. I think it's like UV. I don't know what this is. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm too poor to know what this is? Is that a thing? I feel like this is outside of my tax bracket. I don't know. The most medieval seeming looksmaxxing method is called bone smashing. And it's been promoted over and over again by probably the most famous looksmaxer, a 19-year-old streamer named Clavicular. Looksmaxer, bone... Isn't Clavicular the guy that just did the thing with his Tesla? Yeah, anyways. Smashing, clavicular. I drink hot water when I'm sick. It makes my throat slightly better. It definitely helps. But stick with me because it's interesting. Also, don't you want to understand the youth? Anyway, the way Clavicular describes it, bone smashing is when you take a tiny hammer and tap hard along your cheekbones and your jawbone. It causes a temporary swelling that lasts for a few hours and makes those bones look more defined. So it's something you might do just before a night out so you can look more masculine to any ladies you meet. Maybe at this point, this isn't a crazy revelation, but it turns out young guys in medieval China had the same insecurities that modern men do, and they even went about similar methods of soothing their anxieties. Oh boy. During the Song Dynasty period, there was this really interesting tension between the Wen class, who were the more literary, refined scholars, and the Wu class, who were the more martial and physical warrior caste. Depending on which group you belong to, you'd basically looksmax to make sure your outward appearance matched what you represented. So that meant
meant young men who were part of the scholarly class went to these extreme lengths to achieve this sort of refined, pale physical aesthetic with slender features to essentially highlight the fact that they never had to work with their hands.
Oh, right.
They
Is that like
specific diets and cosmetic aspects of traditional Chinese medicine to maintain this look that would instantly signal to everyone that they were part of the intelligentsia.
Yeah, which is why like people have always it's like people wonder why, you know, in Asia the beauty standard is more pale skin and stuff like that. It is because of that. It's because it's more of a status symbol to not be out in the field, right? So you're not really as tan, and why people go so far to not get a tan in like Korea or like anywhere in Asia. It's something interesting that I found. I don't know if it's rubbed off on me, but I do like pale women. I don't know if that's weird to say, but I kind of do.
Those in the military class, basically who we would consider.
I said this before, I'll say it again.
Chads.
I'll say this before I say this again. We're not in Chinese time in our lives. We're reliving in the Chinese timeline, chat. The Chinese timeline is in fact back. China didn't need to do anything to really take over the West. All they had to do was just have a really cool aesthetics, apparently.
Focused primarily on bone strength. I don't know, maybe that sounds familiar to you.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about muscle, although of course they made sure they were in great shape. It was about the chi energy within and physical density. You wanted to look like a brick wall. That was kind of the physique they were shooting for.
Okay.
It's important to note, of course, that they weren't hitting themselves in the face with hammers like modern looksmaxxers. Their routine usually included things like hitting sandbags or poles to increase their bone density.
Yeah.
There was a 20th century French scholar named Jacques Journet who specialized in Chinese history, and he talked a lot about how these aspects of appearance became kind of a coded language of your class. In the incredibly hierarchical society of medieval China, if you didn't have the specific look, you were culturally invisible. It seems like a lot of young men, and young women too, feel this way today. If you just look up the term looksmaxxing on YouTube or TikTok, the insecurity is overwhelming.
I'm not gonna lie, I really thought the looksmaxxing thing was just a meme. Is that weird? I really thought that this was just a meme. I thought the whole looksmaxxing and all that shit, I thought all of that was just like we're all joking. Haha, guys, I'm lookmaxxing. Hi. Giga Chad memes, blah, 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 blah. I didn't realize people took it seriously. I don't know how to feel about that. I think this guy is a fairly handsome guy in both of them. I don't think any of the other one's a problem.
But it's understandable. We were all vulnerable teenagers once too.
Well, I guess it also depends on what looksmaxxing really means. Like not the whole meme stuff, like with the whole jawline, but I guess like, you know, taking care of your face. Yeah, that makes sense, right? You know, you want to wash your face, you want to use face masks and stuff like that. Yeah, I get that, right? That part I definitely get, right? You want to make sure you don't have a greasy face and you try to like get rid of any acne and stuff like that. Yeah, that part I do understand.
But you see these guys giving each other ratings on a scale of 1 to 10 and recommending which specific steroids or looksmaxxing techniques to try so they can
should
bring
probably
their
not take
flagging
steroids,
features
Chad. I'm not gonna
up
lie.
to speed. This includes peptides, which as far as I understand are these amino acid based performance enhancers, and the use of
Don't use
GLP-1s like Ozempic, which I feel like people associate with an older audience, but there seemed to be a shocking amount of young people taking them. The medieval Chinese were actually big on this kind of thing too. They were obsessed with elixirs made from rare minerals and herbs that were designed to lighten the body and
I watched Black Pillars before, still do, but not as much as before.
extend life. A lot
The only Black Pillar I watch is Pippa.
of these were incredibly dangerous and even included mercury, and I'm sure in the next 10 years or so there will be a bunch of studies showing the horrific side effects of looksmaxxing and peptides. The idea
Oh god, you know what that reminds me of? That kind of reminds me of this Family Guy meme of when Peter was vaping. He's like, it's taken out a bunch of people, but not as many. Or no, was it? It's taking out a few people, but not that many. When he's talking about like vaping and how like it's supposed to be safe, quote unquote. It kind of reminds me of that. It's like, oh, looksmaxxing, it's safe because it's probably taking out a few people, but not that many.
The idea behind this medieval Chinese looksmaxxing was essentially the same as the idea behind the modern version, using some kind of external chemistry or method to hack your biological limits and achieve this sort of superior physical state. The Chinese wrote a lot of things down, and thankfully a lot of them have survived over the centuries. Like the 7th century physician Sun Simao's essential formulas worth 1,000 gold pieces. It was basically this manual for longevity and physical refinement, and if you're familiar with the European concept of balancing the 4 humors, this was along the same lines.
Right.
Simao describes the body as this chemical system that can be balanced or enhanced with specific substances. This idea went even further with the medieval Chinese concept of naidan, or internal alchemy, which taught that the body was composed of 3 main ingredients, qi, jing, and shen, that could be forged into a golden cinder if you were locked in enough on your physical discipline. Locked in is a good term to use here because this sounds just like the trend of locking in that has been popular with Gen Z for at least 5 years now. If you're not familiar, it just means cutting off outside distractions and focusing intently on some kind of personal goal.
I'm not gonna lie, a lot of this stuff, it seems like we're just having a bunch of fancy words and explanations for things that seem very, very simple, I guess, like simple concepts. But I mean, I get that too, because I mean, when you think about it, like losing weight is a very simple concept. It's just like the theory behind it is very simple. It's just doing it is hard, right? Like calories in, calories out it's 4 words. But like such a simple concept has an insane amount of theory around it, right? It feels like the same thing. It has like some simple theories, but it has like a whole bunch of explanations and stuff around it, right? I remember in December, everyone was on their own in their winter arc for some reason. I don't know.
So maybe getting your side hustle off the ground or working out more regularly or whatever. It's become sort of...
Or streaming more regularly. Yeah, you do Blue Demon Rin.
Cult online, especially among the gym community, and based on what you see from these fitness influencers, it's like your pump and your physique are proof of an internal moral victory, like a victory of the will over the...
I remember, like, dude, PRs just hit different, I think. Like, I get that part, right? Like, PRs, when you hit a PR, bro, it's just, man, you just get so hyped off of it.
Of your base body. A medieval Neidan practitioner literally thought the same exact way. They knew that their physical health and their outward radiance was proof that they had successfully cultivated their soul in a way that others couldn't or hadn't. Young people seem way more into fitness now than they...
My God, bro. She's so fine. Chet, I really like lean beef patty. She's so pretty and she's so... Anyways, go ahead.
They did even 10 years ago. I'm not sure if that's a COVID thing, but I love to see it. There seems to be a lot of conversation around the idea that your body is the one status symbol you can't really buy. You can buy a Bugatti or a nice watch or whatever, but you can only achieve a truly amazing physique through countless hours in the gym, so it's really the most impressive thing you can have. There's also this quote from the video game Disco Elysium where a bouncer says to the main character, "Your body betrays your degeneracy," and that always sticks in my head when I don't want to go to the gym.
Oh God, what do they say, Chet? You can always, like I said, simple concepts, right? Another simple concept. You can't outrun a bad diet, right? Like these words, like there's very simple concepts in things like this, but you can go about it a million different ways, which is what I think is pretty cool, right?
Felt like including that. I like tossing random tidbits into these videos.
Yeah.
Now, most of what I've been talking about so far has come from the Song Dynasty, which lasted for a few centuries, right smack dab in the middle of what we would consider the Middle Ages.
Is this a Song Dynasty? What's in the Song? Wage, Yan, Jinza, Guayjo. I'm trying to see what actually has stayed from the Song Dynasty. Not a lot. I think Chengdu is still here. Right? Yeah, Chengdu is still plays. Man. Man, someone in chat or someone in Discord pointed this the other day. Man, China. I don't want to say China. I don't know if the word is China got it right, but man, China really really knocked it out the park early. Is that the word? I don't know. It's weird to say, Chad. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, if it makes sense.
But the Middle Ages lasted almost 1,000 years. So what about the rest of medieval China? You know what? I'm really glad you asked that. First of all, the Middle Ages happened differently in China than they did in Europe. Okay. Basically, even though there are quite a few Song Dynasty parallels, Gen Z is actually in more of a late Ming phase. That's right.
Oh, the Ming Dynasty?
In the earlier Tang Dynasty, which lasted from 618 to 907 AD, your identity was defined by your clan or your rank in the military, basically how people's identities have been defined for most of human history. You were a cog in the great chain of being, and the same thing was true in medieval Europe. You existed within a feudal system put in place by the divine mover. By the late Ming period, which went all the way into the 17th century, there was this rise in individualism that started to run so deep that it turned into the same kind of identity crises and obsession with labels that we see among Gen Z today. You see, Chinese society had reached a level of complexity to such a point that people started to define themselves by their personal quirks and not their family or job. So instead of saying, I am a soldier, a late Ming youngin might say, I'm a connoisseur of rare incense who suffers from melancholy. In a similar way, you'd be hard pressed to meet a young person today who primarily identifies by their profession or their nationality. Find me a 22-year-old who introduces themselves as Garrett the American plumber, and I would genuinely be shocked. I'm sure Garrett will now show up in my comments to prove me wrong because that's how YouTube works.
Shout out to Garrett.
Instead, just like the Ming youth, young people now might identify as a neurodivergent creative with a hyper
and some other things, which is we can get, we'll let it pass for this video. But you guys, chat, you know who I'm talking about, those people.
Fixation on looksmaxxing. It's this obsession with self, and it can be dangerous because you stop viewing yourself as part of a wider community and start squeezing yourself into these ever smaller and more specific boxes. The late Ming period was a kind of renaissance that ultimately failed. It was this explosion of individual expression and art and looksmaxxing and everything else, but it was cut short by the Manchu conquest in 1644. I honestly think we're going to see something similar with Gen Z in the coming years. They're in this period of extreme self-expression and pursuit of individual destiny right before a massive systemic reset comes. Maybe that's AI, maybe it's something else, only time will tell. Anyway, we just briefly stepped outside of the Middle Ages, so let's bring things back a few centuries for our next comparison. I want to go back to those Song Dynasty third spaces we talked about earlier.
Dude, these art pieces are beautiful.
One of them was the Watsi, or the Pleasure Precinct, which sounds pretty good already. Basically, during the Song Dynasty, the government moved away from these strictly managed residential wards and allowed for the growth of pleasure precincts, or Watsi. If you've ever seen The Wire, this was kind of like the medieval Chinese equivalent of the Amsterdam experiment. The Watsi were these chaotic 24-hour zones where all the basic social rules were temporarily suspended, kind of like the medieval equivalent of the unregulated internet. Now, if you let a bunch of young men loose in an area with no rules, the first thing they'll be interested in is prostitution, but in the modern day, you already check that box with online adult content and gooning. After those urges are satisfied, literally the very next thing they want is to gamble. It's a tale as old as time, and it was a big problem in the Song Dynasty pleasure districts, and it's an even...
I was gonna say, nice to know that some things never change, especially out of China with how much gacha games they create. With how many gacha games they actually make, right? They make a ton.
Now on private gambling Discord servers.
Dude, it's not even on private gambling Discord servers. Like, gambling is so in your face nowadays. And I'm not like I'm not judging, right? Because it's not like I'm any better. I literally play and create content around gacha games, right? It's not like I'm any better, right? I'm just saying that some things just never change. Old Asian art is beautiful. Dude, it's so
like
beautiful.
DraftKings and BetDSI. I see so many young people now who are almost turning online gambling into a sort of career path. And guess what? They did the same thing back in the day too. You see all kinds of criticisms from these Song Dynasty officials like Sima Guang,
so rather go to Vegas and gamble nowadays
that young men are abandoning the plow and the book to chase the flip of the die. There's also this modern sociologist named Beverly Yuen Thompson.
I love
writes great stuff about subcultures, and she's noted that fringe groups usually start to form when the mainstream promise of hard work equals success is broken. In the Song Dynasty, your ticket to success was passing the imperial exam, but you could study 30 years just to fail an exam that only had a 1% pass rate. That's a bad bet. Young people now are seeing the same thing. Their parents bought houses and supported an entire family on a modest single income, and now they can barely afford their rent. In this kind of paradigm, why wouldn't you open up DraftKings and put everything you own on some ridiculous parlay? Why wouldn't you dump your whole portfolio into some meme coin?
At least then you're getting some money, dude. When I pour my money into Zibai when she comes out, or with Columbina now that she's out, I'm not getting any money back. All that is that is a black hole of money that I am not getting back. However, I get a hot woman out of it, so it's somewhat worth it for me.
In the hopes it'll take you to the moon. We might think of this younger generation of gambling addicts as just irresponsible kids whose frontal lobes aren't fully developed yet. That's definitely part of it, but they're also making a desperate, calculated attempt to exit a system that has already failed them. Going back to the Watsi, the pleasure precincts, the reason they never fully took over society is because you had to physically go to them. There was a spirit of anonymity. Basically, what happens in the Watsi stays in the Watsi, but you still had to go engage.
Dude, there's so much. Hey, you know what? Shout out to Vegas.
These acts in a somewhat public place and deal with the internal shame of that. Now, with the internet, young people can indulge in all of their most base desires without ever even getting off the couch, and it can literally cost them their entire future. It's worth noting, too, that when you have a bunch of young, desperate people gathering in one place for a set objective, it can create a sort of ideological powder keg. So in the Watsi, these guys formed gambling brotherhoods, and the Song Penal Code tried constantly to break them up because they feared the brotherhoods were becoming more loyal to each other than to the emperor. Now you might get into a private Discord server, ostensibly to do some gambling and trade some insider tips, and next thing you know, you're radicalized into committing some horrific public act of terror.
This Jesus! All right, that's a great
plane, because the main point
that's a crazy way to go about that
is that time is a flat circle, and we're essentially repeating the patterns of the past over and over again. There's the old saying that those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it, but it seems like even when we do study history, we're powerless not to make the same mistakes. The difference now, of course, is that these things are happening on a massive global scale with the full weight of tech companies and government institutions behind them. A soldier in the Song Dynasty might drunkenly head to the Watsi and lose his monthly wages, and that was it. A young 20-something now might obsessively bet his entire savings on an app on his phone and ruin his whole life before it's even started. This is why we need to pay attention to these trends and recognize that even though human behavior hasn't changed, how we respond to it can. But what do you think? Has this video found you at a very medieval Chinese time in your life? Let me know in the comments.
I think so.
As always, I'm John. This has been Medieval Mindset. And remember, the past isn't gone. It's simply waiting to be rediscovered.
That was an amazing video. I love that, dude. I learned so much, and I do love learning things. Chad, if you guys don't know, I actually hated every subject in school except for history. So learning about something like this, especially something that I feel like I am interested in, and it might actually not affect my life, but it can give some perspective into what I am doing and what things are happening in my life. I do like that. I want to get Yakuza tattoo. There's only 10. Yeah, that's pretty sick. Chat, let me know how you guys feel. Chat, are you also in a very Chinese time in your life? Let me know how you guys feel. Comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you gamers in the next one. Bye.